Republicans are experiencing an unexpected surge in the Democratic state of Virginia. What is up, people of the internet? It is me, Real American, back again with a new video, and today we have to talk about the 2024 presidential election because it appears that Republicans are experiencing a surge in Virginia. That is not a misquote. The Commonwealth of Virginia, which, for those that don't know, hasn't voted Republican in 20 years, it appears that Republicans are experiencing a surge in the Commonwealth. Look at this. Day one of early voting shows a 19-point turnout discrepancy in favor of GOP-leaning counties. And before I forget to mention, they're only including the 17 largest counties in Virginia. That means Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, etc. You know, more Democrat-leaning areas than the rest of the state. Well, despite that, Republicans are showing an 83% growth in turnout. Democrats, meanwhile, are going up by only 64%. And these are the counties that lean to the left, much more than the rest of the state. This is bad for Democrats. I mean, look at this. 83% for Republicans, 64% for Democrats. A 19-point gap. And when you look at county by county results, it gets even worse for Democrats because outside of Fairfax, which, yeah, turnout went up by roughly or just under 300%. That's pretty good. That of all these counties, that's number one. Fairfax had the biggest increase percentage-wise. Outside of that, it was a disaster for Democrats. Look at every other Democrat county. 68%, 42%, 73%, 54%. Hell, there was one county that went down by nearly 60%. Not up, down. Now, of course, that could be a fluke. I'm not saying turnout's going to go down by 60%, but either way, it's clear that Fairfax did the heavy lifting. The Republican counties, meanwhile, it was consistent. It wasn't just one county that made up all the votes. No, it was nearly every county on this chart that went up by 74%, 51%, 63, 109, 187, 78, 80, 91, 91, 97, 54. It was way more consistent. It was way more steady than the Democrat counties. The Democrat counties, it was all over the place. And if it wasn't for Fairfax, this number of 64% would probably be closer to like 30%. That is bad for Democrats because this just shows you that early voting was actually really good for Republicans. And by the way, it should make Democrats a little bit worried that, oh, wait a minute. Nearly every Republican county went up by a lot. It was consistent. While our counties, they went up, but nowhere near the same amount as Republican areas did. And for those that are saying, well, these are just 17 counties, maybe it's a fluke. It's not. By some miracle, it gets even worse for Democrats. Look at this. Someone decided to take the early voting numbers and split it up by congressional district, all right? And it's a complete disaster. The top 4 congressional districts in early voting were Republican areas. Not Democrat areas, not Fairfax. No, these are Republican congressional districts that have high turnout. Look at this. The top 4, they're all Republican areas. And someone added it all up. And areas that are Republican leaning had roughly 29,000 early votes. Democrat areas, roughly 20,000. And the swing districts, so if you combine the swing districts with the Democrat districts, they don't even surpass the turnout in Republican areas. That is bad news for Democrats because you cannot just say, oh, well, you know, early voting, Republicans were expected to do better. Yeah, a little better. You're like, okay, instead of losing the early vote by 50 points or whatever, they lose it by 40. You know, do better, but this is beyond just doing better. They are killing Democrats in early voting in Virginia. And we're seeing the same thing happen in North Carolina, same thing in Pennsylvania. Republicans are doing way better in early voting. And you can't just say, well, it's because of Republicans embracing early voting. That's part of it, but At the same time, you're telling me that all the Democrat voters decided, you know what, we're going to vote on election day. Really? You believe every single one of them decided collectively, all at once, you know what, we voted early back in 2020 and 2022, but we're going to vote on election day this time. There might be some of that, but does this look like, you know, a Democrat surge in enthusiasm? Which, by the way, where's that at? Democrats were saying Republicans have a big problem because Harris has enthusiasm not seen since Obama 2008. That's what they've said. Yet the early voting shows the complete opposite. They're getting crushed in early voting in Virginia. I cannot believe that in Virginia, a Democrat state, they are getting crushed in early voting. Now, obviously, I'm not saying Trump's for sure going to win the early vote in Virginia, but if he is, in fact, winning the vote outright, and even if he's losing it by like 5 or whatever, that's not good news for Democrats, because even in 2024, they bank a lot of their votes on early votes. Like, obviously, without COVID, you're going to see Democrats vote on election day more often than 2020 or even 2022. But to suggest that, oh, they're all going to vote on election day, that's not going to happen. It's just not. Is it going to be much more than 2020? Of course it is. But at the same time, these early vote numbers are just pathetic. Because if Democrats start saying that, well, we're going to vote on election day, you're screwed. Because if you have to start saying that as a Democrat, that means you're not getting people out to vote early, which is what you've banked your entire campaign on for the last 5 years. Which they haven't changed that, by the way. They still are banking on early votes. Don't let them fool you otherwise. They are in panic mode over these numbers. They are. If they're doing this bad in Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, do you really think that Harris is going to win in a landslide? No. And the fact is, Democrats to this day still rely on early votes. They do. Not as much as 2020, obviously, but still they do. They rely on early votes to win. Now, with all of this in mind, in my opinion, this vindicates the idea that Virginia is competitive. Now, I still have doubts that Trump's going to actually pull it off, but at this point in time, we cannot deny the possibility that Trump could pull it off in Virginia. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I still find that so unlikely because it's Virginia. Back in 2020, it voted for Biden by over 10, but right now, the polling has the race within 4, outside of that garbage Washington Post poll, which is a clear outlier. Outside of that, the race is within 4. So these early voting numbers actually suggest that these polls are correct. Republicans are not, or I should say Democrats, they're not looking good in Virginia. And if that's the case, what do you think's happening in North Carolina? Seriously, what do you think's happening there? Now, I'm not saying Trump's going to win Virginia. I got to be clear about that because people are going to think, oh, we could win Virginia now. Not necessarily. But the chance of Trump actually winning Virginia, in my opinion at least, it has gone up dramatically. Because early voting should still be Democrat. It should not be a 19-point drop-off. It should not be, oh yeah, Fairfax County is the only county that has good growth for Democrats. It shouldn't be. If this was consistent growth for Democrats, okay, it would be good. But it's clear it's not. While Republicans, they're consistent. They're going up 91%, 90%, 80, 78, 63, 51, 74. They are consistently going up in turnout. Not one county is half our votes and that's it. No, they are consistent everywhere. While Democrats, outside of Fairfax, you don't want to see numbers like -58. You don't want to see 42% in Loudoun. Yeah, Loudoun County, which is in Nova, went up by only 42%. So outside of Fairfax, these numbers are pathetic. And when you factor in the congressional districts, it gets even worse. I really don't know how close Virginia is going to really be, but it makes you really wonder. If Republican-leaning areas are going up this much, 19 points, compared to Democrat areas, well, there's a chance. Now, we gotta know who's actually voting. That's the big X factor. If these are high propensity voters, they lean to the left, right? For those that don't know, high propensity means they vote in every election. They vote every year, and they lean more towards Harris. But if these are voters that are low propensity, like for example, what's to say that the surge in turnout in Fairfax County, what's to say they're not low propensity voters? And for those that don't know, low propensity voters, especially in recent years, they are more Republican. That means they don't vote in any election. They have never voted, or they might have voted 20 years ago, and that's it. But if these are low propensity voters voting early, that makes these numbers even worse, because that means it's not just, oh, the Republican counties are surging. It's super Trump-friendly voters voting early. And if that's the case, Democrats they could lose Virginia. I cannot believe I just said that, but the numbers suggest that there's a possibility that these are very Trump-friendly voters, even in Fairfax. We don't know. I'm not saying I'm not saying they're gonna break for Trump, obviously, but if these are in fact low propensity voters, they're gonna lean more to the right, especially compared to high propensity voters that vote in every single election. We don't know for sure, which is sad, because it would be nice to know who's actually voting. Are these low propensity voters? Because if they are, well, that means the early vote programs that Republicans have built up in recent years, it's working. It's getting people that usually don't vote to actually vote early, which helps them big time, because they're banking their votes in. They don't have to worry about them not showing up on election day if they already voted. It will be interesting to see what happens in 2 weeks from now. But if these trends continue to be this bad for Democrats, oh boy. Democrats could be in deep trouble in Virginia. I cannot believe that's just happening. I really thought that it was be closer, but now there's a possibility that Trump could actually pull it off in Virginia. And I know that sounds crazy, but the polling outside of the Washington Post poll is really good for Trump. And now we got early voting, which I know early voting you have to be careful with, because it could change on a dime. Like next week, it could be very Democrat friendly, but we're seeing trends in North Carolina and Pennsylvania where it started really bad for Democrats, and by some miracle, it got even worse. Yeah, in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, it got even worse for Democrats. If that happens here, I don't know what to say to that. It would be crazy, but we just gotta see what happens. If Trump actually pulls it off in Virginia, I would have no words, because I would just be in complete shock that Trump actually pulled off the upset in Virginia, which I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but the more you look at these numbers, the better it looks for Trump. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what the early voting is showing. We will see what happens in 2 months from now, because with early voting, like I said, it could change on a dime. Like, in a week, it can be super Democrat. We don't know. But right now, if you're Democrats, you start to sweat a little bit. You start to get a little bit worried that, wait a minute, these people are not voting. And the people that are, in fact, showing up to the polls, they're Trump voters. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, hit that little bell, follow the social media accounts in the description down below, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.